Ok, I'm live.
Listo. Ok, dale segundo clic encima de tu video para que te copie el link de tu transmisión. O a lo mejor en algún lado te dice, este es el link para compartir tu transmisión.
Sí, la otra vez me lo había dado, ¿no?
Por ahí te lo dio, en algún lado te lo debe decir.
Sí, la otra vez me lo dio y ahora no me lo está. ¿Esto qué es? Espérate. This is it. Yep. Copy.
¿Lo
Vale.
tienes?
Sí.
Mándamelo por correo.
Sí, voy.
Okay. Proyecto, ¿cierto?
Sí. Ok.
Listo, ahora se me llegó. Quiere aquí. A ver, hazme una seña ahí. Tienes una camisa blanca.
Sí.
Hazme una seña ahí, a ver.
¿Ya me ves?
La mano. Ah.
¿Ya me ves?
Sí, ahora sí.
Okay.
déjame para ver. Ok. Voy a subirte a la página web. A la web para que te empiecen a ver desde Panamá. Bueno. Judá.
Sí.
Les recuerda que las preguntas le dices vía el chat de YouTube, ustedes me las escriben.
Sí.
Y yo se las vía el chat de YouTube o vía WhatsApp, no sé cómo quieran. Pero no le vayas a decir que te hablen ni nada de eso, porque eso si no lo tenemos activo, entonces ahí se va a complicar todo.
No. Yo preferiría verlo en el chat aquí, live.
Ah, ok.
Porque si no, no voy a estar cambiando cositas. Así que les voy a decir que, claro, voy a darles tiempo amplio para que me hagan todas las preguntas que quieren. Las pueden escribir aquí para que luego yo las responda, pero que no me interrumpan mientras estoy hablando. Y que esperen al final.
Perfecto.
Heidi me dijo que la presentación que sea media hora o una hora solamente, así que voy a empezar hablando de mí, lo que he estudiado, mi background y todo eso, presentándome, puesto que Heidi no pudo llegar acá, y luego ya empezaré la clase, y ya luego preguntas y respuestas. ¿Te parece bien?
Perfecto, Juda. Mira, ya te acabo de subir la página web, así que ahora mismo cualquier persona puede ver lo que vas a decir o puede ver lo que estás haciendo, ¿sí? Okay. Entonces, si de repente vas a contestar una llamada o algo para que tomes la precaución, ¿viste?
Ok.
O si vas a decir cualquier cosa por ahí, ya estás en vivo desde nuestra página web.
¿Viste? Vale.
Y lo otro que te iba a comentar es que por favor no vayas a finalizar la transmisión o apagar la computadora o cualquier cosa así, porque ahí tengo que volver a hacer otro procedimiento como para volverte a subir a la página web. ¿Sabes?
Ok, no, yo lo dejo todo encendido ahora.
Ajá. Y cualquier cosa, si te vas a retirar, lo que haces es que, no sé, de repente le pones algo a la cámara y te vas a otro cuarto, algo así.
Sí, eso voy a hacer ahora.
Ah, bueno, perfecto.
Dale.
De todas formas, quédate un segundito más para decirle ya que te vea desde allá, desde Ciudad del Saber.
Ok.
Y le das un saludo allá y ya vamos un segundo.
¿Yo voy a ver a las personas o no? Que yo sepa.
No, tú no vas a ver a las personas.
Yo no voy a ver a nadie. Ok.
No, tú no vas a ver a nadie. Tú estás haciendo un streaming y a ti te van a ver de todos lados, pero, o sea, no es como un Skype que es como que
Sí.
uno a uno o que todos se ven. No, esto es una transmisión, pues si tú eres en la televisión o algo así.
Ok. ¿Y se me oye bien?
Sí, se te escucha, pero ya va, no mentira, no he probado.
Ok,
ya voy a probar un segundo.
sí, tenemos que probar por ver si tengo que buscar mis auriculares que no sé dónde están.
Mira, Justa, le voy a decir a Chat que le voy a decir a Jack que te mande un mensajito.
Ajá.
Y tú háblale para que él pueda probar el nivel del audio y todo eso.
Ok.
¿Oíste?
Ya. Y
le voy a decir que él se comunique contigo por chat.
Heidi ya está escribiendo.
Okay. Bueno, yo ya me retiro de acá de la llamada y que nos comunicamos por chat. Ya todo está funcionando perfecto.
Perfecto. Entonces, ¿se me oye bien?
Las pruebas de audio vamos a hacerlas con Jack. Es el que está allá en sí.
Ya lo veo.
Pues yo te estoy escuchando por WhatsApp ahorita mismo.
Ya. Ya Oswaldo y Juda están live. Sí, lo sabemos. ¿Se nos oye bien? Can you hear? Fine.
Listo, Juda, me desconecto de aquí de la llamada.
Ok.
Cualquier cosa por el chat.
Ok, vale.
Listo, estamos en contacto.
Chao. Hola.
Hola.
¿Cómo estás, animalín? Qué buena cara tienes. ¿Dormiste? Hola, Wendy. Hola, nena. ¿Cuánto eco, Sí. ¿Estáis listos? Sí. Ok, bueno, yo me voy a preparar. ¿Qué? ¿Vale? Me voy a preparar y os veo a las 9 en punto. Sí. ¿Vale? Dale. Yasmina, espérate. Yasmina la tuve que echar porque estaba en mi silla, mírala. ¿Estás listo?
Hola, Yasmina. Hola, animalito.
¿La ves? ¿Ya la viste? Vale. Vale. Besitos. Chao. Bye. Good. Good morning, everyone. I hope that everyone is connected and ready to start today's agenda, which is about public speaking in the realm of the interpreting world. I'm just trying to figure out how many people are connected at the time. Present. Good. Thank you, Miria. That's wonderful. So if everyone who is connected right now could write on the chat on the right side of your computer screens, if you could just say, just like Miria did, that you are present. And this is actually how I would like us to be communicating. So there are no interruptions with everybody trying to talk at the same time. So 25 members. Great. Hi, Valentina. Nice to meet you. So let's just give it a couple of minutes, if you don't mind, until everyone is connected and we can get started so nobody misses out on anything. Also, while we're waiting, Heidi, can you tell me if you can hear me fine, if I should wear my earphones instead with the mic, or is this clear enough and there are no distractions in the background? If it's not Heidi, it could be Miria or Valentina. Anyone could just type and tell me that the sound is good. Awesome. Thank you. So Miria, where are you located? I'd like to see how many countries we have involved. Good day to all. Good morning, Javier. I'm located in Panama. I'm from the US. So nice. Well, nice to meet you. Hi, Heidi from Washington, D.C. Wonderful. That's good to know. Thank you for letting us know, Miria. Give us just a second to connect. Okay, no problem. Good morning, Rocío. Bienvenida. So far we have Maria from Panama and Rocío from El Salvador, but she's in Panama as well. Javier, I'm guessing you're in Panama. And Valentina, where are you right now? 6 of you? Okay, that's good to know. Hola Nancy, y gracias por estar con nosotros hoy. We'll just give it more minutes for everyone else to be able to connect. So thank you for your patience. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Hopefully, if there are more people joining us later, they can just get in and catch up. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here in this little workshop / class that I'm going to present to you today on the art of public speaking and what impact it has on interpreters and the interpreting world on a day-to-day basis. So my name is Huda El Idrisi, and I have been an interpreter for 10 years now. And I have worked in the legal field. I started out as a court interpreter, as a contractor, and I started from scratch. I started by shadowing other staff interpreters and following them around in court, going from case to case and just seeing what it was all about, absorbing all the information and trying to start interpreting in my head. So that's how I got my start in the interpreting world. And then 7 years of that, I decided I wanted to tackle the medical field. And so I did. I moved to Baltimore, Maryland, and I worked at Johns Hopkins Hospital as a Spanish medical interpreter. And I did that for a year. And then I moved back home. My home is Durham, North Carolina. I moved back home and then I started working conferences because that just had a great appeal to me. And I just wanted more variety. I wanted to be able to have everything under my belt in all fields, basically. And throughout that time, I also got a master's in conference interpreting, which helps a lot with skills and just learning how to be better and understanding that the profession of interpreting never ends. You never stop learning. It is an ongoing process, and it is a daily exercise that I'm sure all of you know must do and must have on a daily basis. So since then, I've worked in the military. I've worked with the State Department. I have worked in many, many fields. Currently, I am working with immigration courts. I'm also working with refugee centers that help refugees acclimate to the new culture, which is here in the United States. So I have done this, and I do this in French, Arabic, and Spanish. I happen to be multilingual, and I love languages, and I love different cultures, and I'm always learning, and I'm always striving to get better and to learn more. Now, enough about me, and let's delve right into it. I see we have Javier, Miria, Heidi, Valentina, Rocio, and Nancy. So I hope you are all having a wonderful day. I understand most of you are in Panama, some in Peru. So let's start by defining what is the art of public speaking, and more importantly, why is it called an art? Public speaking is an art, is a form of an art, because it requires a lot of skills. Not anyone can just stand in front of a big crowd and talk eloquently or in a way that attracts the attention of the audience. So just like interpreting requires a lot of skills to learn how to do simultaneous, consecutive, and sight translation, in the same fashion, public speaking requires skills such as confidence, which we will see that this is something that you can actually acquire through practice, because it is very difficult to stand in front of a crowd and speak without getting nervous, without getting stressed out or having anxiety. That is completely normal, completely natural. And believe you me when I tell you, everybody, even the best speakers in the world, get nervous when they get on stage. So that's one of the skills. Preparedness. Of course, you're not just going to stand in front of people and start talking, not having done your homework, not having prepared your speech, what topic you're going to tackle. Have you studied your audience to see who are you talking to? For instance, you're not going to go talk about banning rifles in the United States at the NRA meeting, right? Your audience is just not going to be interested, and they're not going to be listening to you. So that is part of public speaking as well. You research your subject. Also, one aspect that helps a lot of the speakers are visual aids. So if you are sharing data, for instance, you have to use graphs, you have to use charts. Why? Because it attracts your audience attention. And if I'm throwing numbers, chances are my audience is not going to remember the numbers, not because they're not paying attention, but because I'm throwing a lot of numbers at them. So if they have a visual aid in front of them, then they can retain it. They can take notes if they choose to do so, etc. And last but not least is the bibliography. It is very important to have a bibliography, because the bibliography shows that you have done your research, you know what you're talking about, and you're not making up this information and these facts that you share with the audience. Bibliography shows credibility, your credibility as a speaker, which is the key ingredient in any presentation that a public speaker may have to present in their lifetime. So moving forward, when dealing with public speaking and presenting, you have the speaker, of course. You have the message that the speaker is trying to convey. You have the channel, which is, the conference room that you're using, which channel are you going through to inform the people. And then you have the listener, your audience, and the feedback, because your audience gives you feedback. So many times when you are presenting, you have to read the body language and the facial expressions, of your audience. And that's how you know whether you're doing well or you're losing them. So if you see a listener going like this, they're not agreeing with you. So what do? How do you get them back to get back on track and agree with what you're saying? If, for instance, your speech is persuasive, you're trying to persuade the audience of something, you have to read the body language. You have to read your audience and be able to redirect them back and answer the questions that they may not be asking you directly, but you can read in their face. It's a complicated process, but at the same time, with practice, anyone can really be a great public speaker if they do their homework. So with with presentations, with public speaking comes, of course, cultural diversity in the modern world. As we know now, with technology, we've come a long way. So now somebody presenting or giving a conference in China can be heard and watched live in Australia. For instance, what we're doing today is a great example of that. I am based in North Carolina in the United States, and I have all of you from different parts of the world, and you are able to listen to me live. That's amazing. That's something that we were not able to accomplish, some years ago. So with that said, clearly, all of us being from different countries, we speak different languages, and therefore we have to be able to understand each other. And that's where we come to play, interpreters, and we play a very, very important role, as most of you already know, because already in this field. So things to be taken into consideration when presenting, and I really want to tailor this to interpreting mostly. One being ethics. What does that mean? Why do we have to be ethical when presenting? Because you want your audience to believe what you're saying. You want your audience to follow through. You want to have credibility with your audience. So you must always be honest on everything that you say, right? You have to be knowledgeable. If you stand up in front of a crowd and you're talking about something you have absolutely no idea about, is your audience going to believe you? No, you're going to lose your credibility. And credibility is the most important ingredient in public speaking. Your goals that you are presenting must be ethically sound. What you present to the audience has to make sense. You cannot come up with a crazy idea, not do your research, have no idea what you're talking about, and just present it as a fact. Your audience will know. You always have to know who you are talking to. No use of abusive language. If a speaker is foul and uses foul language, you will lose your audience. The audience will not listen to you because you're being abusive or hurtful or insulting. So all these things, all speakers have to take into consideration before any presentation that they make. And then, of course, you have to avoid plagiarism. I'm sure all of us do watch the news and watch politics and speeches. And as an interpreter, you should always be doing that as an exercise on a day-to-day basis. Just be on the know of everything that is going on in the world daily, if possible. And as you do that, as you watch speeches by presidents and kings and vice presidents and whatnot, you can see that sometimes they copy each other, that there is some plagiarism. And that, again, what it does is loses credibility for the presenter. If you're not able to come up with your own presentation to be original or have a team to help you with that, that's not a good speech, and you are going to lose credibility with your audience. So that is very important as well. So with that said, so we talked about the speaker who has to do the speech, who has to do their background research, and they're prepared and they go through their nervousness and they're fine. What comes after that? The act of listening. Listening is very difficult. It is not just the fact that we have ears and they're nicely placed in our heads and we just listen. There is active listening, which is what interpreters are required to do when they're working. And then there's passive listening. Depending on how you look at it, depending on the situation, depending on whether you're interpreting for a conference or whatnot, passive listening can be considered poor listening. And all of us do it on a day-to-day basis. I do it all the time as well. When I'm not working, clearly when I'm at a conference, I am making sure I'm actively listening and paying attention because I have to render the message into a different language. So poor listening, why does it happen? Why does it happen? And do we do it on purpose? Poor listening happens when we're not concentrating. For instance, I'm sure you all been in a situation where you're at a restaurant with a friend and they're telling you a story and you are on your phone. you're not concentrating on what that person is saying. Same thing in a conference. You can be sitting, listening to a presenter and not paying attention on what they are saying. So that's one aspect of poor listening. Listening too hard. And yes, that is a thing. Sometimes the audience can be listening too hard and really trying to grasp so much. They're so focused on what you are saying, on the words, that they are losing the meaning and losing what you are trying to convey to them, the actual message. That is also considered poor listening. Jumping to conclusions. Many times your audience will be biased about a theme, about a subject, and that subject could be the one that you are actually presenting that day. So they are walking in with their mind already made up. So that means that they're not going to be agreeing with you from the get-go. That means they're not going to be listening to what you're saying because they don't agree with you in the first place. That is poor listening right there also. Focusing on delivery and personal appearance. That's another thing that our audience can do. You have a presenter, if they're not well dressed, and we'll talk about appearance because it is very important. If they're not well dressed, if they didn't shower that morning and they look all frazzled, or the way they talk is funny, or they have a tick, they repeat the same thing over and over, like a word, like over and over. So if the presenter has any of these things and the audience is easily distracted by these things, that can cause eventually poor listening and not hearing what the presenter has to say. Is there a way to have better listening skills? Absolutely. It is also an exercise. So one, we can pay attention and really listen to the message that the presenter is trying to convey. We can focus on listening because it is an exercise, and really listen to what the speaker is saying and try to understand and make the effort to really follow through the notes and the points that they're trying to make. Also, we can not judge. We can learn to be non-judgmental, so we're not distracted by our own judgments of the presenter, or by the way they look or the way they dressed. For instance, like I mentioned earlier, one huge distractor nowadays are cell phones. So if you are going to a presentation, turn off your cell phone, silence it. Even just looking at it over and over with the light shining every time can be very distracting and will prevent you from listening. So that is one thing we can all work on. And the last note to become a better listener is note taking. You can take notes. Now, this doesn't mean that you go to a presentation and you are with a piece of paper and pen writing everything that the presenter is saying, because that is part of listening too hard, which is poor listening skills. If you're writing everything, you're not concentrating on what I'm saying. You are just writing notes, and then later on you're thinking, I can go home and I can read it and it will make sense. No, chances are it won't, because you were just taking notes, but you were not focusing on the actual message and what was being said and what was the intent of all the utterances of the presenter. So another important factor, number 3, in public speaking, the art of public speaking and being a great speaker, is language. What language do we use? What words do we use? Do they have to be appropriate? Yes. Do they have to be accurate? Absolutely. What do we take into consideration when using the language to do a presentation? We decide what the occasion is. Is this an informative speech where I'm just sharing data and information with my audience? Is this a persuasive speech when I'm trying to persuade my audience to take action or do something or change their mind about a subject that I feel very strongly about? So that's the occasion. Or is this a special occasion? Am I getting a Grammy? And that's the kind of presentation that I want to give, which will be a bit less formal, right? The audience, like we saw earlier, am I going to give the same presentation on the same topic? For instance, a scientist just figured out a new type of chemotherapy medicine that is way more potent and less detrimental than the one that has been used so far. So that same person, that same presenter, has to present to 3 audiences. Audience number 1 are all oncologists, doctors who come from all over the world, the biggest hospitals in the world, who clearly are in the field, know all the terminology, understand the register, right? Audience number 2 could be the parents and the family members and friends of patients who have these type of cancer. And then audience number 3 could be the patients themselves. It could be maybe pediatric oncology. So there are children, right? So this presenter has to be able to share the same information and give the same presentation. But the only difference between these 3 audiences that the speaker has to take into consideration to be able to give the message correctly is the register. You're not going to be able to present and use the same register that you're using with oncologists, top doctors, and the best hospitals as you're going to use for the kids who do have cancer. Clearly, you're not going to use scientific words with children, right? You're going to have to meet their register and where they are so you can still deliver the same message accurately. So these are things that we have to take into consideration as presenters. Number 4 is the delivery, the method. And this affects interpreters a lot. So I don't know if some of you have already worked conferences or not. I think at least 2 of you have that I know personally. But there are different methods of delivery, right? So sometimes you can have a presenter who's reading a manuscript. And that's the interpreter's worst nightmare. Because when the presenter is reading, the presenter is going faster, at a faster rate. Probably the presenter has already rehearsed their speech a plethora of times. Hi, Jim Morales. So they probably have rehearsed it already, they have prepared it, and of course, like we mentioned earlier, when you go on stage, when you're going to present, when you're on a podium, you get nervous. It is completely natural and normal to get nervous. So most of us, and I'm guilty of it as well, will start speeding. That is something that we have to take into consideration when we are presenting, especially when we know that there are interpreters trying to relay our message in a different language. So if your presenter is reading from a manuscript, chances are you have to be a little faster and ready and on point to try to catch up with them. Okay. The other method is memory. Some presenters memorize their speeches. It is possible. It is doable, especially if you are presenting on a topic that you are not only very comfortable with, but you have researched, maybe you have studied for years. This is, like we say here, this is your jam. So you might not need graphs, you might not need notes, you might not need to read from a manuscript. So that type of speaker who has memorized the speech is actually a bit easier on interpreters because there will be there will be pauses while they're trying to remember what they're trying to present. And then, of course, the other method would be impromptu. There are some speakers who are able to just stand in front of a crowd and, like we say here, wing it, as in just come up with a speech on the spot. And those type of speeches can be actually fun, because they usually, the register could be a little lower. The speaker is calm. He or she know what they're talking about. So there might be a bit more pauses, and it might be easier for an interpreter to follow. What we must take into consideration, and I will touch upon at the end of this public speaking presentation, I will tailor it to interpreters and give you some ideas about that. But this is something that is very important as a speaker, and the audience does take these things into consideration. One is the volume of the speaker's voice. Why is it important? Or why should we care? I'm sure you would say, well, the louder the better. Not really. If the speaker is too loud, it can be distracting. It can be a little annoying if you don't like loud voices. The pitch of the speaker has to be taken into consideration. If a speaker has a very loud or a crisp voice, or maybe they just mumble, the pitch is very, very important, and it has to be nice to the hearing. The audience wants to hear a nice voice, regardless of the message that is being delivered. The rate of the speech. If the speaker is just going super fast, it can be hard to follow what they're saying. It can be exhausting to the ear for the audience to be able to follow the message. Pauses are the interpreter's best friend. I love them. If a speaker does pause, that's a wonderful thing, not only for the interpreter to be able to catch up and finish the last sentence and finish the message that was being delivered, but also it gives the audience a chance to recap what was just said and process the information they just received. If the speaker is just going at a crazy rate and they're not pausing and they're just going idea, just throwing ideas at the audience, they will lose the audience, because the audience can only concentrate so much. So you have to give your audience a break. Pronunciation. I am sure some of you may have worked or interpreted for speakers who had a bit of an accent, and the way they pronounce certain terms can be problematic if you are not familiar with the topic. Articulation. If your speaker does not articulate correctly, it can be problematic. It can be confusing for the audience. You could lose the audience because they're not understanding how you are pronouncing that scientific term, for instance, or medical terminology, or legal. Okay. And then dialect is taken into consideration. So, for instance, if we take all the Latin American countries, I'm sure there are different dialects, different accents, different pronunciations. So if your audience is not familiar with certain colloquial or local terms, you can lose your audience. So it's best to always try to stick with the more generalized form of the language and language that you are speaking. Another thing that is very important during the delivery, during point 4, is the speaker's body. It is very important because, as you all know, in communication is not just a spoken word. It is also your body language and what message you're sending. So if you are standing with a friend and you're talking about something and all of a sudden they do this, that's the universal sign that I'm not receiving what you are saying. I'm being closed up. I'm not interested in what you have to say. So the same thing with a speaker. The body language is very important. If the speaker is standing and slouching and looking down, that tells the audience that that speaker is not confident and they don't know what they're talking about. And maybe they're not comfortable talking about the topic that they have chosen. So it is very important to work on your posture and be able to face your audience and have a good posture so that they feel attracted to listen to what you are saying. Movements, how you move. There are speakers who like to move when they're on stage, especially if they have a handheld mic. There are speakers who like to just stand on the podium and not move a finger. So depending on how you like to own the stage or control the stage, it will have an effect on your audience. Now, audiences, I don't think they care whether you move around or you're in the podium, but if you're just running around back and forth on the stage, that can be very distracting and can also lose your audience. So you want to avoid that. Gestures. Some speakers do a lot of gestures, move around. Maybe the Mediterranean like me. And some speakers don't. They just stand stiff. Your audience will notice that. Your audience, think about it this way. You are entertaining them in a fashion. So you have to be entertaining, not go crazy over the top, start doing backflips, but you have to be able to be animated and to keep them awake and keep their attention focused on you at all times if possible. Last point is eye contact. Eye contact is very important because it does, again, attract your audience. If I am doing a presentation and I'm looking at my belly the entire time, I'm not looking at you, or I'm just reading my notes, it shows that I didn't really prepare my speech. I haven't memorized anything, so I need to be reading at all times. But it also does not engage my audience. If my audience is not getting any eye contact from me whatsoever, why should they listen? Why should they look at me when I'm not looking at them? And that is something that clearly we apply or should be applying in our interpersonal communication in our day-to-day life with our friends, with our family members. You do not go and talk to a friend about something important and you're looking away. You're not even looking at them. So that is definitely a huge part of good, proper public speaking. And like I said before, we have informative, persuasive, special occasion, and small groups presentations. So depending on the topic that you are choosing, depending on where you're presenting, all of these things must be taken into consideration. So those were my thoughts on public speaking. And now tailoring them to interpreting. I understand that some interpreters might think that it is not important to mimic or emulate the speaker, but it is actually adamant that we do that as professionals. So for instance, when I'm working in court and it's a heavy case, and maybe there's a witness who comes to the stand and the witness is crying. They are relating something that is sad to them, something that happened to them. Maybe somebody wronged them. That is why they're in court. So if the witness says something like, "Sí, entró a mi casa y me robó todo lo que tenía y me dejó sin nada," and I go and say, "Yeah, he went into my house. He took everything. He stole everything and left me with nothing." Am I interpreting the emotion of the witness? No. I am reading it without any emotion whatsoever. Is that going to have an effect on the case? Maybe. Especially if there's a jury and there's usually a lot of people present in the courtroom listening to this. So if your goal is to portray that emotion, then you have to be able to emulate the same emotion of the speaker, depending on where they are. If somebody's telling a joke and they're being very animated and they're laughing and then, telling stories, and your tone is very monotone and repeating that, you're not portraying what the speaker is saying. The joke is going to be lost, and jokes are already very hard to interpret as it is. So you have to try and mimic the tone, the feeling, and the register of the presenter as much as you possibly can. In the same fashion, you're not going to be in a medical appointment with somebody who is terminal and they're not feeling well, and you're being all chirpy and happy and laughing about it. that's ethically wrong. You have to be able to emulate the exact feeling of the speaker and what they're trying to convey. So I feel like I've been talking a lot, and I would like to take some questions. If you guys have any, you can go ahead and write them here on the chat box, and I am happy to reply to all your questions if you have any. Would you say that all these aspects of public speaking that you mentioned apply to interpreting? Absolutely. Like I just finished saying, absolutely, they do apply. You have to be able to be a good speaker. You're not just an interpreter. You are a speaker because you are the voice of the speaker. So yes, you have to apply all these things. Even, for instance, many times, interpreters will ask, well, I'm going to be in the booth. Nobody's seeing me. I can show up in my pajamas. Is that appropriate? No, it's not. You have to dress up appropriately and come, because even though you're in a booth, people can still see you. People can come and talk to you at the end. A lot of people are very intrigued about what we do as a profession, and they want to see that you're a professional and that you look the part. In the same fashion, if the speaker is using a high register and you are using it all very colloquially, you're not doing a good job. You need to be able to meet the speaker on the same level. So all of these points that we discussed absolutely apply to interpreting. ¿Cómo se interpreta una emoción? Una emoción, like a feeling? Could you be more specific, Suzette? Because it's going too fast and I also interpret to keep up. Is that right? Or should I slow it down and summarize? Okay, I'm going to answer Heidi's question and then go back to Suzette when she explains it a bit better. If a speaker is going too fast and I also interpret too fast to keep up, is that right? Or should I slow down and summarize? That's a good question. And it really does depend. It does depend on the type of speech and the occasion and how much time are you having and how much time as an interpreter are you able to listen and grasp all the message. As you already know, you should never, ever summarize. However, in critical, like least favorite occasions when you don't have any other option, that would be the last resort. Especially, for instance, to give you an example, and this has happened to me, in the emergency room, and Suzette, I'm going to get back with you. In the emergency room, one time a patient came in and she was on something, and she was speaking really fast. Speaking really fast, jumping from one emotion to another, crying, screaming, grabbing on people. It was out of control. It was impossible to interpret what that patient was saying because she was speaking very fast and it was emotionally heightened, and her state of mind was not calm, was not what you would consider normal. So in that occasion, yes, I summarized what she was saying because it was simply not possible. So, Suzette, when someone is crying, well, you don't cry. That's number one. You do not cry. If somebody's crying, chances are they're not going to be able to finish their sentences. So you have to be very patient. It would be best to take notes of what they're saying because it might take them longer. But no, you're not supposed to be crying with the presenter or the patient or the defendant, but you use a tone that is appropriate. And you just convey the same message, but you don't have to be crying. Absolutely not. We're not actors. Does that answer your question? So for instance, I can give you an example. So for instance, if somebody's saying something hurtful, this person wronged me or they hurt me and they did this and they start crying, you stop, you wait for them to finish. You wait for them to finish the sentence, however long that takes. And then you just repeat and say, I was hurt, this person did this person did that, and this person did that, and I'm really upset. That's the tone I would use. Okay. I did answer your question. Great. Miria, the concern is that if you imitate an emotion, it may be seen as sarcastic or una burla. Okay. Well, emulate, not imitate. What do I interpret in jokes? Okay, so if someone is happy, and I do this in court all the time. If someone is very excited or excitable, and they're like, "Oh my God, es que yo me fui a esto, hice lo otro, blah blah blah," I cannot just be like, "Oh my God, yeah, I did this and I did that and that," because I'm not portraying their emotion, but I don't have to exaggerate it either. For example, especially in court, you don't have to mimic the gestures. You do not have to do that. Why? Because you are being seen and observed by everybody, by the judge, by the attorney, the DA. Everybody's able to see what you're doing. So you do not have to repeat it. So if the person says, "He shot me here," you're just going to say, "He shot me here." You don't have to show also your arm or the place where it was shot. What about interpreting jokes? Are you asking me for a joke or? No, I'm joking. So interpreting jokes, like I said before, can be tricky because they just like proverbs, right? You have to be able to adapt them to the culture of the language that you are interpreting. So it is very difficult. Sometimes if you have the equivalent of that joke in your target language, you should tell that joke, not try to interpret the actual words that were said. And sometimes if you don't have any, what you resort to is say, the presenter just made a joke that is untranslatable. That's it. It's okay to do that. Gold nuggets, great tips. Okay, Javier. Okay, did I answer all the questions? Do you have any more questions for me? Valentina, what if the speaker says something unethical that you didn't expect and you feel uncomfortable translating it like a racist or sexist joke? Thank you, Valentina. This actually happened to me yesterday. Yes, so you have to interpret what you hear. You do have to interpret. Now, the question becomes, how uncomfortable are you as an interpreter? Is this something that is insulting you as a person? Is this something that is unethical or goes against your beliefs? So in these circumstances, you do have options, just so you know. Let's say you are at a hospital or in court or anywhere where the person is racist and is really making those racist comments, and it's making you uncomfortable because maybe you feel like it's directed at you, right? In that scenario, if you as an interpreter do not feel comfortable, you should excuse yourself and find a replacement and say the interpreter does not feel comfortable to continue. Why? Why should you excuse yourself? Because if you don't, you're going to be biased. We are human. We have feelings. Even though we are there as the conduit of the conversation that is taking place, we also have feelings. We are our own people. So if you ever feel insulted, attacked, uncomfortable, and you have the ability to get another interpreter and excuse yourself, you should do that. Otherwise, if you do not feel personally attacked, but it's just your opinion that this guy is really racist, I don't like what he's saying, but you're okay, you have to interpret it. You have to do, that's your job, even especially in court. If the defendant says a bad word, if the defendant says shit, you have to say mierda. You have to. You cannot omit. It is not your job to omit, embellish, summarize, like I said earlier, because that means you are choosing what to interpret and what not. And that is not your job. Does that answer your question, Valentina? What are some ways, from Miriam, what are some ways that you practice public speaking skills? The mirror. The mirror is your best friend and you have to do it. I know it feels uncomfortable and weird and maybe you feel like you're crazy talking to yourself, but that is the only way to get better at public speaking. stand in front of your mirror. Before you stand in front of your mirror, so write down your speech, you've done your homework, you've done your research, you have everything, you're comfortable with your topic, read it over and over and over and read it to yourself, then stand in front of the mirror and rehearse and practice your speech and make eye contact with yourself in the mirror. Number two, once you feel comfortable doing that alone, you ask your friends or family members to be your audience. And you present to them the speech and tell them, please be critical, give me feedback, notice not only the content of my presentation, but also my body language. How do I come off? How is my voice? How is my tone? And hopefully they will be honest and they will give you their feedback. And once you have that feedback, you build upon it, you take their notes into consideration, and you apply them to your speech style, and you get better. Hopefully I answered your question. Valentina, yes, thank you. You're welcome. Have you ever had to excuse yourself from a situation? Is there any job that you would feel uncomfortable taking in the first place for ethical reasons? Absolutely. Yes, I have excused myself from one situation where it was too much emotionally. It was very emotionally charged. And I felt that I was not going to be able to render anything because it was affecting me personally and emotionally and psychologically. So at the time, this was at Hopkins, I paged because we had a code. Just so you know, if you guys ever work at a hospital, you know there will be a code. It's SOS. You send it in the pager and say, send somebody else. I cannot do this. And they are supposed to send you a replacement on the spot. Let's say you are somewhere where you cannot find another interpreter, or you're not with an agency. You have to excuse yourself. It doesn't matter. Don't be like, oh my God, where are they going to find another interpreter? What am I doing? No, because it is unethical to stay in a situation where you know you are going to be biased or not be able to do your job correctly and appropriately. Is there a job uncomfortable? Yes, I would not interpret for Donald Trump. Nancy, si el estilo del orador es seco y monótono, ¿deberíamos seguir su estilo o mejorarlo un poco de nuestra interpretación? Well, again, yes, you should do better than if the speaker is monotone and boring and not attracting the audience. You can add a little bit of yourself and not be, you don't have to imitate or emulate his monotone tone, but you cannot go over the top either. If the speaker is like, yes, so this is the cell formation that we were talking about, and you're like, oh my God, so this is the cell formation we were talking about, guys, and you're gonna love this. You cannot do that because it's wrong. It's ethically wrong. But you can say, this is the cell we were talking about, and now we're gonna see this and this and that. You still can use your own voice that is not as boring. Does that answer your question, Nancy? It has helped me also to make a video before asking someone to hear me. Absolutely. Use your technology, guys. We have great technology nowadays, and it's amazing. I mean, look what we're able to accomplish right now. Absolutely. If you don't feel comfortable, let's say you're a little shy, you don't feel comfortable, then nada, Nancy, speaking in front of people immediately, then yeah, record yourself. Watch it in the same fashion as interpreters, and hopefully you guys do this. Every time you get a chance to interpret, or even when you're doing your daily exercises at home, like you're supposed to, record yourselves on the phone and listen to it and ask yourself, did that make sense? Am I following the speaker? Am I rendering the same message accurately? If somebody could just hear me and not the speaker, would they know what's going on? Okay, so in the same fashion, you can do the same thing for public speaking. If you want to critique yourself and see what are the areas that you are lacking in still, absolutely record yourself in video, watch it, send it to friends, and work on those skills. Any more questions? No? Okay, well, if you guys don't have any more questions, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for attending this workshop. I definitely enjoyed it, and I hope I provided you with some skills and notes on to what to work on to be a better public speaker. And please, I want you to leave here today with the understanding that just the fact that you are an interpreter does not mean you are not a public speaker. They actually go hand in hand, and it is your duty and job to get better at it. Okay, all right. Thanks so much for your time. Anytime, any day-to-day tips to practice your interpreting skills. Very, very interesting. Absolutely, Valentina. Every day, I'm going to tell you what I do, and see if it works for you. Every day, I like documentaries. I pick something that I like. I am a huge fan of Egyptology. So when it's time for me to sit after I'm done working and doing what I need to do, I will always turn on a documentary on YouTube on Egyptology in French. And I will sit and watch and actively listen and interpret into English. Okay? First thing I do when I wake up in the morning is I put on the news in Spanish. And then again, I interpret them into English. And then sometimes I'll watch a movie in a different language. But if I just want to turn off my head, then I just watch the movie. I try not to interpret, but sometimes son gajes del oficio, that you just start interpreting everything that you hear. You need to get good about separating that, because you do need to rest your mind. Your mind gets mentally tasked as an interpreter on a day-to-day basis. So the good thing for you, you have to practice every day. So if you don't have time to sit down and put on a speech by Obama and start interpreting, you don't have time, great, that's fine, that's okay. But use your downtime to practice and put on a documentary on a different language. I'll watch like Al Jazeera in Arabic, and sometimes even if I don't feel like interpreting simultaneously, I'll just start repeating loudly, speak up. I start repeating what is being said, because that also helps me with enunciation, because Arabic is different, French is different, each language is different. So just repeat the same message. You don't even have to interpret it into another language, and see if you can follow the presenter every day. You are welcome. Valentina, did I answer your questions? You are welcome, Heidi. It was my pleasure. Thank you, Rocío. So I just hope you guys all leave today with the understanding that you have chosen careers that are wonderful, rewarding, but also stressful. So you have to really, really practice on a daily basis. You will never, and I think that's the difference between a wonderful interpreter and a not so great interpreter, which you guys will encounter in your lifetime, unfortunately, is that an interpreter is never, ever done. You're never going to get to the point where you say, I know everything, I can stop reading now. Never. If you believe that, this is not for you. You have to be curious, study, read, watch the news, know everything about everything on a daily basis. You are welcome. It has been a pleasure, and go out there and be great interpreters. I wish you good luck. Rocío, it was a surprise you used some healthcare examples. That's my field. Good, Rocío. I'm happy. Thanks, Eddie. Panama interpreter is such an amazing. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you. This workshop's really helpful. Absolutely, Kuro. It's been my pleasure. I'm very happy to share these tips with you guys, and I hope that it was helpful and you can apply some of them on your daily interpreting. Okay, goodbye.